The only thing my father gave me that was of any value is pain. And you want to take that away?
Can I?
You know, it's pretty much a miracle that any movie gets made, but there's something especially remarkable, I think, about the story behind the Shia LaBeouf written Honey Boy, and about how the pain and trauma in a child's life was transformed into a source of healing through the very creation of a film written to recount and expose that trauma. Now, if all that sounds a bit confusing, I'm gonna do my best to explain it, because it's a story I think worthy of our time as filmgoers.
Otis, I've been doing this a long time. I saw your tests, and you have clear signs of PTSD.
No, I don't. From what?
Shia LaBeouf's Honey Boy is a semi-autobiography about an actor named Otis at two consequential periods in his life. The first at 12 years old, chronicling the abusive relationship between him and his father, a Vietnam War veteran and recovering drug addict. And the second, a decade later, in court-ordered rehab, where Otis is being treated for the long-term effects of that relationship.
Yeah, I was in a mental institution, and they told me I had PTSD. They said the only way out is through. We got a solution for you. That solution is called exposure therapy. So we're going to go through all these dark chapters of your life, and we're going to expose them and write them down and play them out. And so I was doing this for a couple of weeks, and I had something that felt like scene work, actually.
Shia LaBeouf wrote the first 70 pages of Honey Boy while still in rehab. The film's screenplay is what became of his exposure therapy sessions. It is an exploration of trauma and the lengths we go to find acceptance of the hands that were dealt. Now, it can be easy, I think, to discount these kinds of stories as they pertain to celebrities. I'm certainly not one to get overly sentimental about the rich and famous, but this isn't a sob story, and it isn't an apology. Honey Boy speaks as much to LaBeouf's specific circumstances as it does to universal societal truths. The film's director, Alma Harrell, often talks in interviews about this idea of generational trauma, a cycle of pain carried from parent to child. This kind of trauma can be passed down genetically or through social mechanisms, and in the most tragic cases, it can manifest itself through patterns of abuse and addiction. Honey Boy is about breaking this cycle, not by escaping it, but by confronting it, by placing cause and effect side by side to understand their relationship. In fact, what makes Shia LaBeouf's story and Alma Harrell's storytelling so captivating is their layered focus on that relationship through the use of narrative and thematic parallels. Structurally, this can be best seen in the film's parallel narrative threads. Otis as a child living with his addict father in a budget motel in Los Angeles, and adult Otis, now a Hollywood star, being treated for trauma and addiction following a drunk driving incident.
I ran from it because it was not serving me. It was destroying me. That's when I was getting really drunk and fucked up. That was all during that time when I just felt like I was becoming soulless. I couldn't navigate myself anymore. I just felt like I was dissipating.
It's in adult Otis's therapy sessions that he learns to connect his anger and his self-deprecation with the circumstances of his childhood by writing them down, by turning memories into stories. This retrospection not only forces Otis to place cause and effect together, it also motivates the visual storytelling that binds the film's two narratives. The scenes with adult Otis and the scenes with young Otis interweave at key points throughout the film via Harrell's parallel imagery, usually in the form of non-verbal shots of Otis alone. Like a cycle, one moment or action in young Otis's life will find itself occurring again in his adult life, or vice versa. However, changed by the circumstances surrounding these moments, their significance and meaning are recontextualized. For example, in this scene, adult Otis is asked by his counselor, played by Martin Starr, to go out into the woods alone and just scream as loud as he can, and he does, curled up towards the ground in rage and devastation for all that's happened, and it's a shot that's crushingly paired with one of young Otis yelling out into the ether, but this time head held high, innocent, in elation, a lifetime of opportunity still ahead of him. Through these kinds of contrasts, we as an audience are given the opportunity to access Otis's memories through the same subjective lens a broken, beaten adult Otis views them. Now, that's just great visual storytelling. But by showing us what young Otis becomes, not only do Harrell and LaBeouf draw parallels between the character at the two stages of his life, perhaps more significantly, they reveal a relationship between who Otis will be and who his father was. And in a story about generational trauma, it's especially fitting, then, that Shia LaBeouf should play not himself, but his own father in the scenes with his younger self, effectively embodying the complete cycle of intergenerational cause and effect.
You know, my dad was in jail, got out of jail. We weren't spending a lot of time together, and then when he got out of jail, you know, we moved into a motel in Playa del Rey next to the Fox Hills Mall, and we're living there for 4 years, and that's how I got to know my dad.
Wow.
So it was like rent-a-dad.
Had alcohol and weed, and I grieved her, and then I joined the Army. 'Cause what else? And I came home, spun out.
In Otis's father, we see a young Otis that could be. His mania rests on a hairline trigger, a combat veteran, a victim of a wartime government that valued its pride over its people, an addict on the brink of relapse, and like Otis, a performer, too, a rodeo clown who never quite made it. The performance that Shia LaBeouf delivers is one of the most compelling and honest I've seen in years, certainly in part because it's accessing something uniquely personal to the actor. I mean, so often in films, the addict, the abuser, is painted as the villain, but how do you villainize your own father? A father Otis wants nothing more from than to be proud of him, to be there for him. But what intrigues me more broadly about the character is how it's one that can't be immediately understood through a single scene. He's a character who is loving one moment and absolutely devastating the next, and you believe each side of him as being his whole self for as long as that side of him lasts. But more importantly, Otis believes it. There's one part of his father that clearly wants and expects nothing less than for Otis to be the very best that he can be, and yet another that belittles him and shames him constantly.
You thank your mother for that. You got a dick like a golf pencil, son.
That shit stuck with me. It made me aggressive and had a Napoleonic complex. It made me scared to be naked in front of people, physically, not emotionally, but just be naked in front of women, and, you know, shit made me very, like, insecure for a long time.
It's the dynamic between young Otis and his father that no doubt drives the emotional engine of Honey Boy. The drama that shapes young Otis's life does not take place on set or in front of the camera, but here, in these conversations, in the confines of a dingy motel on the dark underbelly of Hollywood. And it's a dynamic tainted by perhaps the most destructive force of any relationship: jealousy.
You made it. Hey-o! I never could. Fucking congratulations. Good on you, honey boy.
For one, there's a clear jealousy towards Otis's success, and although it's an envy forcibly masked by pride, it's certainly in part a manifestation of this bizarre role reversal of a father who's being financially supported by his own 12-year-old child. Then there's the jealousy Otis's father has of anyone whom he feels competes with him as caretaker to Otis. Now, this includes Otis's mother, but it includes other men in Otis's life as well. When Otis's mentor, Tom, a member of the Big Brother program, comes to the motel for a barbecue, his fatherly affection and personal stability are enough to violently trigger Otis's father. This scene is also interesting because it shows us the two sides of Otis's life, the kindness and security he finds at work and elsewhere, and the tension and chaos he's surrounded by at home, physically colliding. And it's at this point when one potential future for Otis is defeated and the influences of a damaged father begin to dominate him forever.
Was it weird to have a kid play you?
Super weird, yeah. Yeah, and he was a great actor. So like there'd be, it's my life, and he'd be stealing scenes because he's so good, and I'd just be feeling jealous about this little kid thinking.
Did you give him tips on how to be you?
Well, he was better than me, better than I ever was, better. But I empathized with my dad's jealousy, things that I just didn't even
Interesting.
think yeah.
Relationships are complicated. They are inexplicable. They are dueling. Everything in Otis's life is a constant push and pull, a give and take. He lies helpless, always at the epicenter of two extremes, of love and pain, of comfort and chaos, of encouragement and envy. It's in these extremes, in these dualities, in these parallels that Honey Boy poses its biggest questions, namely how we can reconcile between so many competing forces in our lives, how Otis can reconcile his childhood trauma with the love he inherently feels towards his father. But I think it's through empathy that Honey Boy begins to find its answers. As the painter Nancy Good once said, empathy is key as it speaks the language of connection. Empathy in art banishes isolation and invites healing.
Did this help the relationship with your dad?
Oh yeah, it didn't just help it brought it back to life, it resurrected it. We weren't talking at all. And I hadn't seen him for, 7 years. Yeah, so, me and him were good. I talked to him this morning in the car. He's like a cute old man with a beard laying in bed, we're in a good spot.
Honey Boy isn't just about recovery. Its very development was a vehicle for recovery, for empathy, for catharsis, for confronting one's own demons by literally becoming them, and in doing so, breaking free from an endless cycle of generational hurting. And if a movie that can do that isn't a miracle, then I don't know what is.
What's your message to other kids out there who are dealing with parents who are alcoholics?
Don't waste your pain. Yeah, don't waste it. It's a useful paint. Yeah.